The first record of the child appears in an encrypted file dated 2142. The entry is short. Clinical subject manifests as pre-adolescent human, estimated age 9, no growth observed. That would be unremarkable if not for the next line. Chronological markers inconsistent. Entity appears unstuck from time. Official documents classify this incident as mass hysteria following the Red Star disaster. Yet the handwriting on the margin, different ink, hurried stroke, suggests another story. It spoke my name before I spoke it. If we take the file at face value, it is either a crude hoax or an impossible event. But if we pause, if we examine the commentary erased between redacted lines, we find unease that feels more genuine than denial. Why did the archivist add those notes in secret? Why preserve the file at all if the phenomenon was nothing but delusion? Perhaps what frightened them was not the child itself, but what the child implied, that the future does not wait politely in sequence. It can arrive early, wrapped in a small figure who should not exist. Official records from the decades after 2142 dismiss the case with bureaucratic precision. One memorandum states, no evidence of anomalous juvenile. Reports attributed to stress-induced hallucination following orbital disaster. The language is sterile, rehearsed as though written more to protect reputations than to document reality. And yet, in the margins of unrelated files, the child appears again, like a watermark bleeding through paper. Different locations, different witnesses, always the same description. A boy or girl no older than 9, always alone, always silent until spoken to. But folklore remembers what archives deny. In underground forums and oral the child is known by many names. The time orphan, the witness, the last heir. Rural settlements whisper that these children appear on the 13th night after a blood-red sunset. They speak with knowledge too precise to dismiss, reciting future names, future accidents, future dates. If all of this were fabrication, why do these stories remain consistent across continents, across languages? And why do they echo the very details official documents were so determined to erase? Digital folklore speaks where official history stays silent. Fragmented posts on abandoned networks repeat the same claim. There are children who do not age, who slip through decades unchanged. Old forums, archived before the net collapse, show blurred photographs always grainy, always inconclusive of a child in the background. Watching metadata reveals nothing, no timestamp, no geolocation, as if the image itself resisted being pinned to a moment. Attempts to trace the files end in corrupted directories, folder loops, and systems crashing. One thread, recovered from a deep web crawl, tells of a family who took in a child after a storm in 2099. The story ends abruptly after the 14th day. No further posts, no closure, only silence. Some users claimed the account was deleted. Others argued the family was erased instead. What unsettles me most is not the lack of evidence, but the persistence of the pattern. 13 days of contact, then disappearance. Folklore may distort facts, but it rarely aligns so neatly across time, place, and culture. So the question lingers, was this simply rumor, or the outline of a truth too dangerous to keep intact? The closest thing we have to evidence is a short video file recovered from a broken archive server. The clip lasts just 9 seconds. At first it shows nothing unusual, an empty hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. Then, near the 6th second, a shape emerges at the far end, small, unmoving, a child, standing perfectly still. The camera lens refocuses, struggling with the distance, and in that fraction of clarity the figure lifts its head as if aware of being watched. Before the frame can sharpen, the video collapses, the screen bleaches white, the audio fractures into static. Metadata analysis confirms the file was recorded decades before the first official mention of the child. Skeptics argue the glitch is deliberate corruption, evidence of tampering. Yet what unsettles researchers is the sensation reported by those who viewed it firsthand. The feeling that the child was not captured by the camera, but looking through it past it at whoever pressed play. Commentary of file can be forged, yes, but fear is harder to counterfeit. Why would so many describe the same reaction if nothing stood there at all? Among the scattered fragments of testimony, one diary stands out. The handwriting is steady, deliberate, not the erratic scrawl of hysteria. The entry begins plainly. Day 1, the child appeared outside my shelter after the storm. I assumed it was lost. The writer describes offering food, water, and warmth. The child accepted silently, eyes fixed on the floor. Nothing unusual until the moment the witness introduced himself. Before the words left his mouth, the child said his name. Not guessed, not repeated, but spoken with certainty, as if recalling a memory that had not yet happened. By day 7, the witness reports recurring dreams. The child standing at the edge of a ruined horizon, whispering dates he did not yet understand. Day 12 notes the unease of neighbors who claimed their clocks slowed near the house. The final entry, day 13, ends abruptly. It said I would not write tomorrow. There are no more pages. The journal was found in an abandoned dwelling, owner never located. Commentary skeptics dismiss this as invention, yet the consistency with other accounts, the 13-day limit, the prescience of names begs the question. How many coincidences must align before denial becomes its own kind of fiction? What unsettles researchers most is not just the vanishing of data, but the persistence of memory. Digital files corrupt, recordings bleach white, devices crash. Yet witnesses describe the child with uncanny consistency, down to the tilt of its head, the cadence of its voice, the exact number of days before disappearance. If technology cannot hold the image, how does the mind retain it so vividly? Some propose this as proof of collective fabrication, mass suggestion, filling the void where evidence fails. But others argue the opposite, that memory is the only vessel resilient enough to carry what machines cannot process. Commentary: when history relies on fragile servers, what does it mean if only human recollection survives? Does that make it less real or more so? The archivists who redacted files seem to understand this paradox. They could delete documents, but not the trembling voice of a farmer, the sleepless testimony of a neighbor, or the diary page that ends mid-sentence. In that sense, denial becomes a kind of admission. The very act of erasing confirms there was something worth fearing in the first place. Official history is blunt. A directive from the Ministry of Records states, no verified encounters with temporal anomalies. Reports of unaging juveniles are unfounded. Clean, clinical, confident. But the same year, hospital logs quietly declassified decades later list a cluster of unexplained disappearances. 13 individuals, all reported missing exactly 13 days after contact with a wandering child. None were ever recovered. The coincidence is too precise, too repetitive to dismiss. Folklore fills the gap with grim detail. Villagers speak of the 13th night, when anyone who shelters the child is claimed by silence. Some say their clocks stop, others that shadows in the house lengthen unnaturally until they fold the occupant into nothing. These accounts are dismissed by officials as superstition, yet the paperwork remains. Missing persons filed, investigations inconclusive, patterns unacknowledged. Commentary: history insists on closure, but here it offers none. If the records are correct, then folklore is fabrication. But if folklore is even partly true, then official history has been lying for generations. Which absence should we fear more, the absence of evidence, or the absence of truth? For years, the child remained only in stories, half erased, half imagined, until a fragment of audio surfaced from a corrupted archive. It lasts less than 4 seconds, but it is enough. A thin, steady voice, unmistakably young, whispers in a language older than the recording itself. Digital linguists reconstructed the phrase, cross-referencing phonetics with multiple dialects. The translation, though contested, repeats the same warning. Don't go to the Red Sun again. The phrase raises more questions than it answers. The Red Sun disaster is officially catalogued as a stellar anomaly, a failed orbital project, nothing more. But why would a child, if it was a child, speak as though it had already seen the consequences of a second attempt? The voice does not tremble, does not plead. It recites the words like a memory, not a prophecy. Commentary: if warnings arrive from the future, are they meant to prevent what comes, or to ensure it? And if a child carries that message, do we listen to the words or to the silence that follows them? The phrase, "Don't go to the Red Sun again," is simple, almost childish, but its implications fracture into multiple interpretations. Astronomers argue the Red Sun refers to a stellar anomaly catalogued in 2094, when an experimental orbital project collapsed into flame. Official records describe it as a catastrophic error in solar shielding, yet the warning suggests recurrence, not memory. If the child's words are accurate, someone sometimes to repeat the attempt. Historians see it differently. In fragmented folklore, the Red Sun is not celestial but political, a coded reference to the empire that burned cities red in its final wars. To them, the child's voice is not cosmic but cultural, urging us never to rebuild what was once destroyed. Commentary: and still, another possibility lingers. What if the warning itself is the trap? If the child exists outside time, speaking not of what it remembers, but of what it forces us to create? Perhaps the Red Sun only returns because we were told to expect it. Perhaps the messenger is not saving us, but ensuring the cycle continues. One of the few testimonies that reached beyond rumor came from a rogue researcher, a man expelled from the academy for tampering with restricted archives. His final interview, preserved only in fragments, is unsettling. He insists he met the child not once, but twice. The second time he claimed he broke the unspoken rule. He reached out, I touched its hand. The transcript reads, "It was warm at first, then colder than vacuum. My skin froze while burning. I pulled away, but the mark remained." Medical records show he later sought treatment for a scar that defied classification, neither burn nor frostbite, a hybrid wound unresponsive to medicine. When asked to describe the child, he refused to give details, saying only, "It looked at me as if I had already died." Commentary: skeptics dismiss him as delusional, but the scar is real, photographed in several independent reports. If physical evidence exists, then the child is not only memory or folklore, and if that is true, then the boundary between witness and victim grows dangerously thin. In the years after the Red Sun warning, whispers began to circulate of a map hand-drawn, copied and recopied through underground forums. The map was crude, sketched on scraps of digital parchment, but its pattern was unmistakable. Clusters of circles, each marking a location where the child was said to appear. The circles were always near boundaries, abandoned cities, quarantine zones, restricted research sites, places where official access was prohibited and where folklore thrives in silence. One copy, preserved in a private collection, shows 13 marks, all aligned with fault lines and decommissioned power grids. Another version adds symbols resembling ancient constellations, linking the sightings to a pattern in the sky. Attempts to trace the origin of the map always end in dead servers, vanished accounts, or corrupted drives. But the consistency is chilling. Different versions, different hands, yet the same geography of fear. Commentary. Maps are tools of memory. They preserve what might otherwise be forgotten. If the child is only myth, why would so many mark the same forbidden places? And if the map is real, the question deepens: are these locations where the child appears, or where it waits to be found? The last artifact linked to the child is a recording no longer than a single breath. Found on an obsolete handheld device, the file survived only because the battery failed before the corruption could spread. When restored, it reveals a faint voice, childlike, yet unsettlingly calm. No static, no distortion, just words spoken with impossible clarity. Will you stay, or will you come with me? There is no context, no location, no indication of whom the question was meant for. Analysts argue endlessly. Some say it was directed at the recorder, others claim it was meant for anyone who listens. The phrase has the cadence of invitation, but also of judgment, as though one answer leads to safety and the other to oblivion. The most disturbing theory suggests the act of hearing the recording makes you the subject, and that the question is still waiting for your reply. Commentary. Questions are meant to clarify. This one does the opposite. What does it mean to stay? What does it mean to go? And perhaps the most chilling thought of all, what if no matter how you answer, the child already knows? The file ends where so many others do, in silence. No closure, no final testimony, only fragments of erased names and corrupted timestamps. Archivists labeled the case unresolved, then buried it beneath layers of redaction. Folklore, however, refuses to let it die. To this day, whispers linger in villages, in abandoned networks, in the nervous pause of those who claim to have heard the recording for themselves. And so the question remains: was the child truly a visitor from our own future, sent back as a warning? Or was it something older, something that wears the shape of innocence to move unnoticed through the wreckage of time? The evidence is contradictory, the commentary inconclusive. And perhaps that is the point. When facts dissolve, only fear and memory endure. Commentary. Some truths destroy by being known, others by being ignored. The child offers us no certainty, only a question without an answer. Should we keep searching for it, or stop before it finds us first?